Hello and welcome to the memory card. Now you might not know this, but I'm actually a big fan of the Kirby franchise despite being a latecomer to the series, not really playing much of a Kirby game until late December 2015 whenever I got my Wii U. Now, I definitely have been doing my best to catch up on the Kirby franchise, playing as many games as I can, and there's a lot of really good Kirby games in the franchise. But today we're going to be talking about the game that started it all, Kirby's Dream Land, on the original Game Boy. I might have actually played one back in the day on an old original model like this, but maybe you were born around the time I did and you would have played it on a Game Boy Color. Now, I didn't because I didn't really play much Kirby games as a kid, but the Game Boy Color would have been a good way to play back then. But nowadays, if you're going to be playing with the original cartridge, the Game Boy Advance SP would be the way to go. It's a great handheld, and having an actual screen that's lit up helps a lot. But for the purposes of capturing gameplay for this video, I'm going to be using the Super Game Boy on the Super Nintendo, since I don't have a Game Boy player for the GameCube yet, unfortunately. But hope you'll enjoy the video. Kirby's Dream Land was released in 1992 and was made by Hal Laboratory. Now this was the first game in this long-running franchise, and it's one of my favorite Nintendo series ever, but this was also the very first game by its creator, Masahiro Sakurai, when he was just 19 years old. Nowadays he's more well known for making the Smash Brothers games. This game actually establishes a lot of the hallmarks of the franchise, like a lot of the reoccurring baddies like Waddle Dee and King Dedede, and Kirby's ability to float around, and the general cues of the soundtrack as well. This music is very good, especially for an early Game Boy game, but this is also carrying a lot of the same themes that are in all the soundtracks of pretty much every other Kirby game ever made. One interesting thing about Kirby's Dream Land is that it actually predates two of the most key aspects of Kirby. His ability to copy the powers of enemies that he inhales, and his pink color. Considering that this was an early Game Boy game, he was either just going to be black and white or piece of green if you're playing the original Game Boy model. Now, both of these aspects were established in the sequel, Kirby's Adventure, on the NES, so it wasn't very long before Kirby was truly solidified as the character that we know and love today. Even though this was at the beginning of Sakurai's career making video games, a few key aspects of all of his work are reflected in this game, mainly the idea of a video game being very accessible, deceptively simple, but also having a lot of hidden depth and a great attention to detail. Although those facts are true of many Nintendo games, Hal Laboratory is actually a second-party company to Nintendo. But the amount of polish and attention to detail that they put in their games is about on par with any first-party release from Nintendo. They're truly one of the most consistent game developers around. Playing Kirby's Dream Land nowadays is interesting in comparison to the rest of the Kirby franchise, considering it's much simpler and shorter than the vast majority of mainline Kirby games. Kirby's Dream Land is also slightly harder than other Kirby games, but then again, Kirby is generally pretty easy, so that isn't really saying much. All that really amounts to is that I didn't beat this game on my first try, and I don't think I did on my second try, but if I didn't, I got a lot closer. Now, some people point to the relative easiness of Kirby games as a fault, but I don't see it that way whatsoever. Most Kirby titles, especially Kirby's Epic Yarn on the Wii, have what I would refer to as adaptive difficulty. And what I mean by that is that it's not hard to beat a Kirby game if all you want to do is finish each level. Where the difficulty comes in with a Kirby game is trying to get a high score or get all the medals or find different pathways you didn't go before, depending on the particular game in the series. I think this is a huge benefit to the Kirby series because it's so approachable to anyone regardless of your skill level with video games. Kirby games are about as easy or as difficult as you want them to be, depending on what you're trying to get out of it. This gives these games a deceiving amount of depth, which is part of why I love Kirby games. That and they're just so happy. I don't think it's humanly possible to be upset or even frown while you're playing Kirby. And sometimes after a bad day, you just want something bright and cheery to contrast with whatever bad things are going on. Like when you come home from a bad day of work and your dog is wagging its tail and just so happy to see you. Pure joy is just contagious. Now that doesn't mean that I want all my entertainment to always be pure, bright sunshine and joy. My favorite show is Game of Thrones. Well, favorite live action show. Thanks to the fairly short length of Kirby's Dream Land and the relatively low difficulty of it, if you're just trying to finish each level, this game is very approachable to people that are young or new to video games in general. So that makes this not a daunting experience for people like that at all. And I highly recommend this game to basically anyone that likes platformers or just fun games in general. Later releases in the Kirby franchise would likely be more enticing to people that play a lot of video games, since there's a bit more to Planet Robobot or Triple Deluxe in the Nintendo 3DS than there is the original games on the NES or Game Boy. One thing that might be frustrating to someone playing Kirby's Dream Land for the first time is that, like a lot of early Game Boy and NES games, there's not a save feature in this game. Now that isn't a huge deal considering how short the game is, but it can be frustrating if you have to quit playing before you finish a playthrough. Like there were times in college where I was playing Kirby's Dream Land before, and I would have to leave to go to a meeting or a class or go to work on a project or something, and I would have to shut off my Game Boy and lose all my progress on a playthrough because I don't want to just keep it running and just drain my batteries, so that kind of sucked. But then again, like I said, it's a short game, so it's not a huge deal breaker or anything. And honestly, other than that, I can't really think of anything else I dislike at all about this game. It is just so happy and fun and well designed and polished. It's truly a fantastic game and worthy to be referred to as a classic. With a new Kirby game coming in 2018, it's definitely interesting to see where the series began and how it's changed and yet stayed very consistent throughout the entire franchise, give or take a few spin-offs here and there like Kirby's Epic Yarn. But this game, the original, is still a blast to play and is good to play regardless of how old this game is. It's held up really, really well over the years and has a polish to it that is indicative of any first-party Nintendo game or Hal Laboratory's game in general. And this game has a great pickup and play feel just because how easy it is and accessible and how well designed and polished it is. It's got an endless replayability to it like Star Fox 64 or the Mario games on the NES and Super Nintendo. You can definitely recommend this without any reservations whatsoever. But regardless, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time on the memory card.